Good morning, everybody, and welcome to day two of NARCon 2024. My name is Mark Wise, and we'll spend the next not quite an hour on airspace, air traffic, and weather. Um, Before we get started, I do want to shout out to a couple of folks whose ideas were helpful in the presentation, in the creation of this presentation, starting with Bruce Canino's presentation on ADSB at R&D at the Geneseo NARM, and James Duffy, who, although he wasn't aware of it, some conversations we had at the ARC finals last year did help to inform the presentation that you're about to see. Let's see, I've attached a PDF of the slides, so if you want to jump ahead, feel free. I don't mind that at all. Please post questions to the Q&A. So a little about myself and where my subject matter expertise, such as it is, comes from. Last year, I celebrated half a century as a Rocketeer and drove by the baseball diamond at my old elementary school, where I flew my first rocket, a Centauri Moonraker, off the pitcher's mound. Been in and out of the hobby a few times since. I got involved with NAR and sections in the early 80s, got involved with NAR at the national level around 2010, helped John Hockheimer and Trip Barber, mostly Trip, rewrite the section manual, and then joined the board, became secretary, and for the last few years, I've been managing the scholarship program as well. I'm only level 1. I had a calamitous level 2 attempt at the Missouri NARM, and I'm trying to get built for a reattempt this summer. So let us go to screen sharing and get going. Window and okay, we've been through that. So we'll break it into 3 sections. We'll talk about airspace and the legal considerations that make it important for us to care about the airspace, and some websites and apps you can use, with the understanding that none of these are devoted to model rocketry, and we have to repurpose them a bit and think about how they really apply to us. Some websites and apps for locating air traffic and figuring out or helping you to determine whether it's going to present a hazard to your rocketry operations and vice versa, and how to interpret a data block on FlightAware, which is probably the most commonly used and easiest of the apps to use, at least that I've found. And we'll talk about weather. Now, you could devote an entire NARCon to weather. I freely admit that, but we're going to go to a couple of websites, look at collecting forecast information, current weather, and figuring out what's relevant to rocketry and what really isn't. First principle, and lest you think I was going to give you some magic algorithms and magic websites to replace eyes, ears, and brain, nothing will. And we'll get into that. For example, ADSB, which broadcasts aircraft position, not every aircraft has it, and you might not be able to access the data. So keep looking, keep listening. Another thing, as we go through and look for weather information online, we have to know the identifiers of the weather reporting stations. Almost always airports. There are some exceptions. The U.S. Naval Academy, which is about 25 miles from where I'm sitting, has an automated weather reporting station, and that's NAK. Because it's in the continental United States, for most weather reporting functions, you have to add a K, KNAK, or JFK, LAX, you're always going to see a K. If I have anybody who got up early who's in Alaska or Hawaii, you probably already know this, you put a P in front. And Google, Wikipedia, the web is your friend in this case. So why do we worry about airspace? We're flying, if we're in the low power end of the spectrum, we're flying little bitty rockets. Even if you were to hit an aircraft, which is awfully hard to do, you're not likely to do it much damage. One, it's bad practice. It's hard on the rocket. But also, if we go back to Part 101 of the Federal Aviation Regulations, 101.5, you may not operate a moored balloon, kite, amateur rocket, or unmanned free balloon in a prohibited or restricted area unless we I'm not going to get into an argument on pronouns. That they're right now the CFRs just use the generic masculine. But unless you have permission from the using or controlling agency, you may not fly a rocket in a prohibited or restricted area. Seems pretty straightforward, sure. So what is prohibited airspace? Defined dimensions on the surface, defined by an area on the Earth's surface within which the flight of aircraft is prohibited. Okay, it seems like a pretty straightforward definition. Established for security or other reasons associated with the national welfare. So I'm going to pull up a chunk. On the left, you're looking at a section of at a piece of the Washington sectional chart for VFR flight. The just below dead center is Washington National Airport. We're going to get into a discussion of the airspace around that in a bit. But if you follow the red arrow to the right, you will see designated P40 and R4009. Well, 4009 overlies P40, but P40, that is a prohibited area established for reasons of national security. In this case, it's protecting the airspace over Naval Support Facility Thurmont, better known as Camp David. Okay. Other reasons associated with the national welfare, P204, and that's a huge prohibited area. I mean, that's got to be, that's 80 miles east to west, easy, probably more. I didn't think to measure it. That is prohibited below 4,000 feet, and that's to preserve the Boundary Waters canoe area. Those of you in the upper Northwest or in the upper Midwest who've been canoeing there, you may have noticed that you don't see low-flying aircraft over the Boundary Waters. This is why they'd be violating prohibited airspace. So what's restricted airspace? Operations are not wholly prohibited, but subject to restrictions. There's a restricted area between the airport from which I fly and Ocean City, Maryland, and depending upon the route I take, I might actually wind up calling Patuxent Approach and asking if the area is hot, and usually it's not. But on a bad day, you could be trying to share the airspace with an FA-18 in flight test. So unusual, often invisible hazards to aircraft. Give you an example here. Again, same center, this is National Airport. Over here, I'm hoping you can see my cursor, is Dulles. And here, the two parallel runways, that's Andrews Air Force Base. Come on down, cross the Potomac. We'll follow the arrow here, the Potomac River. This is Naval Support Facility Dahlgren, Naval Service Weapons Center Dahlgren, and 6611A, that's a gunnery range, naval gun testing. So, yes. Uh-oh. Okay, how do I fix that? With other viewers, I appreciate your patience. So, we'd already heard me discuss this, but we're on prohibited airspace. I just want to show you the graphics. So here's P40, Camp David, Maryland. I have flown, you can fly through the restricted area. Again, you wind up, if you're flying an aircraft, you call ahead, you check to see if the airspace is live. The prohibited airspace over the Boundary Waters, again, that's enormous. Restricted airspace, here's where we stopped. Here's the Potomac River. We've got the Dahlgren complex. Here's National Airport. Here's Andrews, Dahlgren. So when the Navy was testing railguns, electromagnetic railguns, here's where the projectiles were going. The chances of you actually getting hit by something, minuscule, but a truly bad day if you do. Again, really probably not applicable to model rocketry, but these are just good examples of what make up restricted airspace. Some other legal considerations. We hear some parts of of FAR 101 exempt low power rockets, smaller rockets. Uh, as far as the hazardous operations definition, 101.7, it says any amateur rocket. That includes low power and mid power. Okay. And why is that important? Because when you go down to section 23 of part 101, you may not operate an amateur rocket in such a manner that you must operate an amateur rocket in such a manner that it does not create a hazard to persons, property, or other aircraft. If you fly high power, you're well aware of this requirement. This is why you have to make sure that your launch site is a specified distance from an occupied building, for example. So where can you go to find out about your airspace? Old school aeronautical charts can be a little tricky sometimes, correlating your location on the ground with the information on a sectional aeronautical chart. But if you want to go that route, available at your fixed base operator and flight school at the local airport. Lots of online dealers out there, Aircraft Spruce and Specialty, Sporties.com. I think ASA. Or skyvector.com has a decent website, and you can zoom in, and the cursor there actually gives you latitude and longitude, which is kind of nice. Or you can use an app called Before You Fly. It's available for Apple, for Android, and a website. It's intended for drone operators. And so when you look, for example, here at the restricted operations, that may or may not be applicable to rocketry activity. So I went to the website yesterday, took a screenshot, dropped a point over Naval Support Facility Thermont, and immediately I got redlined. NSF Thermont, special use airspace type prohibited. If I would click to the More tab, it would give us a little more information. If you want to find out the status of restricted airspace, SUA for special use airspace.faa.gov. It's got sort and filter functions, and you want to pay attention to minimum and maximum altitudes. So let's see. I'm going to try to. Oh, that is not going to let me do it. Hang on. Okay, there we go. So here's an example for before you fly. If I'm looking at, say, a flight near, well, I'll go down to Mankato, Minnesota, near where Todd lives. Faribault, Waseca, Owatonna. Well, if it's been a day. Okay, let's use Waseca instead, just because I'm having a dumb attack here as far as. So, you've got to be aware of Stensrud Field at Waseca, and okay, it's loading. Security web space, Waseca, DOJ. There's a federal prison there, or a federal facility there, so you wouldn't be wanting to fly there. But otherwise, Waseca, if you can find some decent farmland and the landowner, you're in pretty good shape. So let's move to special use airspace, because I promised you I would look at that. You can go to a text list, and you can say, for example, you want to look at restricted airspace. And you're looking at, let's just say, R6606. It's in Virginia. Minimum altitude is ground level. Maximum altitude in hundreds of feet is 23,000 feet. On the other hand, if you want to fly a rocket in 5311 Bravo in North Carolina, as long as you stay below 7,000 feet, you're actually legal. How about that? So that's an example of special use airspace, and where you can find out whether the airspace is active and whether it's not. And I did mention the DC flight restricted zone. You saw that. So again, centered on centered on Washington National Airport. It's generally speaking a 15 nautical mile radius around National Airport, and pretty much if it flies, it's forbidden. No hobby-sized drones, no UAS-sized drones, no model aircraft, to include radio control or control line or free flight, or model rockets. I think I've got some NAR hamsters in the audience. You recall we had the monthly launches, still have the monthly launches at the Goddard Visitor Center inside the red circle here. John Hockheimer, when he was section activities chair, and NARHAM's leadership worked with the NASA Visitor Center people and had to coordinate with, I believe, FAA and Homeland Security to get a waiver to do that monthly launch. And it was epically difficult. So I think, give me a moment here. I am going to go take a look at the Q&A, see if there's anything. Blast. Sorry, I'm okay. Let's take a quick look for 3 questions. Not screen sharing. Okay. So taken care of, taken care of, taken care of. And again, all my shamed apologies for that, but lesson learned. Okay. Let us go back to screen share. So air traffic awareness. You're going to get tired of me saying this, but nothing replaces human eyes and ears. That being said, FlightAware is an app that's quite useful. It's available in separate iPhone and iPad versions if you're an iOS user, and if you're a pilot, you will be, because it's rare now to fly without an iPad in the cockpit. There's also an iPad version. Or here, I took a screenshot from flightaware.com. This was yesterday morning. Gives you an idea of just what's in the air at any given time. So how does it work? Well, most aircraft have transmitters inside them on board. They're typically on the hot battery bus, so you can't turn them off or pull the breaker or anything. Automatic dependent surveillance broadcast. Constantly broadcasting GPS location and pressure altitude. Now, a note on pressure altitude, that's the altitude based on standard atmosphere, which is 29.92 inches of mercury at sea level. Aircraft also have the receiver ADS-B in, and so that'll be displayed generally on the cockpit GPS display. And if you're flying with an iPad, taking the place of paper charts, you generally can get that information on your iPad as well. Lots of ground stations out there and home stations, and you can actually order everything, and that's the graphic here. You can order a kit from FlightAware to set up a ground station at home that feeds into your computer, which in turn can feed information to the internet. Bruce Canino gave this demonstration at NARAM 60. I blanked. NARAMs run together in my mind, but anyway, Bruce gave a demonstration of that during his R&D presentation. So I took a couple screenshots here, and I think in the interests of time, I'm not going to toggle over to the website just to make life easier. So on the left is a screenshot from the app. I happen to have an iPhone. It's going to look the same on Android. The blue dot marked my location. So this is Howard County, Maryland, between Washington and Baltimore. The green dots mark local airports. This is my nearest field, FME. It's Tipton Field. It used to be Tipton Army Airfield. It's tied to Fort Meade. So here's the data block, UAL 2468. Okay, you can probably infer from context that's the flight number, and United Airlines logo certainly makes things easier. It's a Boeing 737-900. For those of you who've been following current aviation events, there would be an M. If it were a MAX, it would be B73M. It's not. It's level at 30,000 feet. It's traveling 460 miles an hour. And EWR MSI, you can infer from context that's departure and destination. In this case, it's Newark to New Orleans. Some, as we know, some airport designators are more intuitive than others. If you go to the website, it's more of an old school data block, a little harder to interpret. Probably not relevant, but this is Envoy Air, that's ENY, 3826. They fly as American Eagle. They're a wholly owned subsidiary, not really relevant. It's an Embraer 170. It's at 14,700 feet above sea level, and it's climbing. That's the caret here. It's traveling at 379 knots. That's about 400 miles an hour. Traveling from Cincinnati to O'Hare, and its ETA was 8:30 Central Time yesterday morning. Okay. I'm going to take a quick look and see if anything's popped up in the Q&A. Oh, okay. David, thank you. Sorry for the, can't see the cursor. And I think everything else is under control. Okay. Okay. And here, and again, shout out to Mr. James Duffy for reminding me of some of these points as we were discussing this last spring. Not all aircraft are required to have ADS-B out. If the aircraft doesn't have an electrical system, way back when I got about a dozen hours in an Aeronca Chief, no electrical system, you actually had to do the World War I thing and hand prop it to start it. Other classics, some home builts, or if you're operating in Class G, which is airspace that the FAA has neither the responsibility nor the authorization to control traffic, aircraft's not required to have ADS-B. You also need a cell phone. You also need cell signal at the field. I don't know what the cell signal is like at Black Rock, but I know a lot of high power fields are out a long way from cell coverage. If you really want to go crazy, you can buy an ADS receiver and you can buy the ForeFlight app with your tablet. Or if there's a pilot in the club, you can leverage what they have. But the receiver's a few $100, a ForeFlight subscription's another few $100 a year. Probably overkill. Something else, the data is near real time. It may not be instantaneous. And then, as I touched on briefly before, be aware of the difference between altitude above mean sea level and altitude above ground level. Here, right now, I'm at 250 feet sitting in my dining room. Not too much of a consideration if I were looking at an air and it said an aircraft was at 4,700 feet. Okay, I'm not going to touch it with a model rocket. But when we're up in Pueblo and we're already several thousand feet above mean sea level, then you've got to factor that in when you do the math. You can't say, well, there's that aircraft at 14.7, and so we're fine. I'm only flying to 6,000 feet. Yeah, but if we're already at 6,000 feet, could be a consideration. So know the elevation of your field, and any GPS app on your phone will give that. Okay, weather. Okay, I'm looking at the time. So we're going to talk a bit about forecasts and some basic forecast products. And those of you who are aviators, if you have other ideas, if you would please include them in the chat, and we'll speak to them when we get through the slide deck. When I'm working a live room, I try to make it as much of a discussion as possible. This isn't really a format that allows that. So, okay, so we'll talk about the aviation forecast discussion, prognostic charts, invariably referred to as prog charts, and the TAF, the terminal area forecast, and then we'll move on to locating and interpreting current weather information. So why is this important? I mean, hey, it's a nice sunny day. The clouds look to be really high. Why should I care? It's really, in any practical sense for what we do as rocketeers, more directly relevant to high power. Must not operate Class 2 high power rockets or Class 3 advanced HPR at any altitude where clouds or obscuring phenomena of more than 5/10 coverage prevails, or at any altitude where the horizontal visibility is less than 5 miles. Now, you're not going to get reliable information on visibility at altitude unless somebody has filed a recent pilot report from the air, but it is what it is. And you may not fly a high power rocket into any cloud. So we're going to spend a little time at the Aviation Weather Center, aviationweather.gov. Okay, and so right now here we're seeing current conditions, and generally the darker the dot, the less conducive it is to rocketry or to aviation of any sort. The purple, low IFR, red IFR. We'll talk about what those mean in a bit. But what that can give you a quick snapshot of what you're looking at in your area. But for products going several days out, we can go to a forecast discussion. So let's see. So for NIRA and Fox Valley and the Chicagoland sections, let's take a look at the area forecast discussion for National Weather Service Chicago. Okay, so low IFR, very low IFR conditions persist today. Areas of dense fog. Well, nobody's flying rockets today. Okay. But this can give you a discussion. You scroll down. Here's what's going on. Western Great Lakes remains locked in a weather regime. You get a textual description of what to expect over the next few days. That's not necessarily all that useful day of or day before, but if you've got a launch scheduled on Saturday, it might not hurt to start looking at the forecast discussion on about Tuesday or Wednesday. The prognostic charts go even further out. So I'm going to scroll back a bit. And this can give you information. Right now, it's for today at 15 Zulu, so 9 a.m. Central Time, and I can scroll it all the way out to March 3rd at 7 a.m. Zulu, and any point in between. Now, long-range forecasting, it's less reliable and less precise the further out you go. Okay, so now I've scrolled over to the 29th at 00 Zulu, so the 28th at 7 p.m. my time, and I'm looking at, hey, I can pull up a legend. I'm looking at likely rain. Going further north, we're looking at snow and wintry mix, but the legend is really helpful. Until you've messed around with this the symbology is not going to be intuitive. Totally get that. So that's the prog chart. Terminal area forecast. You can pull up a map, give you some idea of what's going on, if you know how to interpret the symbols. So right now, 3/4 cloud cover at Philadelphia. Oh, that's right. You said you couldn't see my screen. Okay, or my cursor. So you can see purple is pretty much unflyable, red unflyable, blue. You need to know how to read the symbols, and we'll come back to a slide there. You're probably going to get more useful information from the TAF data. So let's see. Let's see what it's looking like. NARAM is in Pueblo this summer. Let's see what the weather's like in Pueblo today. Or I'm sorry, what the forecast is for Pueblo. If you know how to read a TAF, okay, great. Let's decode it. And we'll click load data. And this is for somebody who doesn't deal with aviation a whole lot. This is probably more useful. So because it's going to convert knots to miles an hour. It's going to convert. Actually, no, it does. It's not converting Greenwich time, Zulu time to local time. So from noon to 1600 today, variable winds at 5, visibility 6 or more miles, ceiling at least 12,000 feet AGL. Actually, looks like a pretty good day to fly. I hope somebody's flying in that today. Let's take a look at Muncie, where we've flown in Narrum. Oh, really? Okay, Muncie is not a forecast station. Let's go up to Minneapolis. Wind is from the west at 6 miles an hour. Visibility is 4 miles an hour. Ceiling 400 feet above ground level. Yeah, definitely not flying high power there today. Okay, so we've discussed the area forecast discussion, the prog chart, and something else that's useful to know for prog charts and forecast discussions: the definitions of VFR, marginal VFR, sub VFR, IFR. So VFR, visibility greater than 5 miles and ceilings above 3,000 feet. The ceiling, and we're going to get into that a bit more, is the base of the lowest cloud layer that can be defined as broken or overcast. Marginal VFR, probably I would be inclined not to fly unless I knew everything I was flying was going to be on the low and slow side. We've talked about the prog chart. We've talked about the terminal area forecast map. Another caveat about TAFs, about terminal area forecasts: they're only valid for flight planning purposes, they're valid within a 5 nautical mile radius of the reporting station, and that's to give pilots an idea of whether they're going to be above minimums for the type of operations. I'm not instrument rated. I'm not going to fly into an airport. I can't legally fly into an airport where the conditions are below minimums for VFR flight. Let's see. We talked about that: winds, visibility, ceiling, clouds, weather phenomena. Definitions of sky conditions. Now it's interesting. FAA says may not fly into an area of more than 5/10 cloud coverage. Weather reporting uses octals rather than decimals. So avoiding HPR flight into the clouds, sky clear. Definition: 1/8 to 1/4 cloud cover, few, scattered 3/8 to half to 50% cloud cover. Broken and overcast, again, no go for the expected altitude. If the expected altitude that you're flying to takes you into a broken or overcast layer, you are no go. All right, current weather, and I'm not going to pull up a raw METAR. We'll just go with what I pulled up here for International Falls, Minnesota yesterday. The raw temperature and the dew point are going to be in degrees Celsius, and negative numbers will be M. So if you're looking at the shadowed bar underneath where it says text KINL and the time, if you look down, you'll see M02/M04. That's -2 for the outside air temperature, -4 for the dew point. But that'll give you the conditions at what was 9:34 a.m. I'm sorry, no, 9:34 yesterday. And again, it converts into Fahrenheit for people, for those of us who are more comfortable with Fahrenheit temperatures. Wind was from the south-southwest at 6. Visibility was 10 statute miles or more. Overcast at 1,000 feet. So again, maybe a day for low and slow, low power rockets, nothing flying high. I did include a point here to beware of the difference between miles per hour and knots because of the 20 knots or 20 mile an hour safety code limit. But if you're using a translated METAR, you've got it in regular miles per hour, statute miles an hour anyway. So that should be a moot point. There are a couple of websites that consolidate this information, and I'm going to pull those up now just to give quick live examples. So I've gone to airportview.net and I preloaded Delaware County Regional Airport, Muncie, Indiana. So the report's 21 minutes old, wind from the east-northeast, sky overcast. And then you can look to the left. That's And you can see wind is at 4, no gusts. So a couple of other things that are useful is it's automatically going to give you the nearest terminal area forecast. So if you look under the forecast banner, TAF Gus, that's Grissom Air Reserve Base. Gus is in Gus Grissom, yes. It's not translated, but if nothing else, you now know that there's a nearby TAF, and you can go back to aviationweather.gov and pull up a TAF for Gus. What's really useful on this site is if you look down below the compass rose, KMIE AWOS, Automated Weather Observation System, it gives you a phone number. So if you can dial the phone and get the real-time report from the Automated Weather Observation System. Okay? And then if we go to metardtaf.com, it's giving different information, but we're looking here. You can see circles around, V for VFR, low for low IFR, M for marginal VFR, giving you some idea of what the sky is going to be like in that area. So what happens if we scroll in tighter? We get more information from more weather reporting stations. So it's actually looking like, so let's see, Montgomery County Air Park, Baltimore Washington International, National Airport. Okay. So just other options. So I'm going to go to the, let's see. Okay. All right. When you demonstrate live feeds, they do not show on screen. I do apologize. It's been a while. Where do we see NOTAMs, including any we may have been issued? Bob, I'm finding where I'm likely to go for that is flight service, 1-800-WXBrief.com. The other thing I might do for that is actually call flight service. I'm trying to remember where I go for the latest NOTAMs. I'm going to come back to that, get to the last slides, and maybe we can ping Duffy for that in the chat. So 2 quick last slides. I warned you that you'd get tired of hearing me say this. Nothing replaces the Mark 1 Mod 0 eyes and ears of the Rocketeer. Some websites, and again, not all inclusive, but Before You Fly and the Special Use Airspace website for the FAA, Flight Aware for traffic, the weather sites, and flight service. And I think what I would encourage you to do is just take a half an hour sometime, go to 1-800-WXBrief.com and just see what they can do. So, okay. I'm going to go over to chat. Can't see the browser? Rats. Okay. I am so sorry. We thought we'd gotten everything successfully troubleshot. Okay. Well, let's see. So what I will do there as federally, thank you, James. notams.aim.faa.gov. Okay. Gold star on your report card, Mr. Duffy. So let me go back and give you an example. So that's metartaf.com. So there was so that when I went live on it and scrolled in, I was just showing you the tighter you scrolled in, the more weather reporting stations popped up. Airportview.net. Today, what the hey? Airportview.net gave us temperature, winds. It gave us the METAR, the current weather. It gave us the forecast. And if you were to scroll down, it would give you a phone number for the local automated weather observation station. And we'd already shown this. So Let's see. Okay. Enter the airfield. Okay. Perfect. Duffy, I owe you a beverage at our ARC this May. Thank you. Um, let's see. Going over, checking for any. Okay, I'll get with Todd on that. I do not know what went wrong that way, but it's definitely something that that we need to troubleshoot. Okay, so I've seen no more recent questions. Um, okay, I'm going to scroll through the chat, see if there's anything I can contribute there. Okay, yes. Okay, and kudos to Todd for the technical support. Um, okay, yep. Hope you find this. Definitely hope you find the slides useful. Okay. Yeah, I used to fly on Arlington school fields as a kid, not in years now. David Kane. Oh, depending upon which Arlington, Texas, you're probably good. Arlington, Virginia, no, well inside the flight restricted zone. Now, every now and then I would see posts on Facebook saying, "Hey, flew a rocket in such location today." um, Not such a great idea. So this is where we steer people to the monthly NARHAMS launches at Goddard, or the club launches, or Novar. I mean, depending upon where people live. I mean, Great Meadow is a bit of a haul for me, but if I want to fly something a little larger, I'll head out there. And I belong to both sections. Okay, caveat on NOTAMs: so many issued that it is challenging to glean any useful information from the flood of information. Oh goodness, yes. You are drinking from a fire hose. Absolutely. I don't I don't know of a way around that other than just, I would say, as with almost any software or website I ever got familiar with, play with it until you're familiar with it. If this is something that interests you, if you want to get more into the weeds on these sorts of things on the aviation products, you can. It's online, but you can also buy hard copies of the Aeronautical Information Manual. They're usually paired with the Federal Aviation Regulations, although the print FARs usually don't have Part 101, or they might have Part 107 now for drone ops. But Part 101, you generally are going to have to go online to see. So let's see. Okay. All right. I'm tell you what, that really covers all I have, and you have the PDFs of the slides. And if you have questions at the end of the PDF, please, if you have questions or comments or arguments, or if you're like me, you think of the perfect question to ask about 48 hours after the perfect moment to ask it, totally get that. Go to nar.org, go to the administrative directory, and just click me. I'm the NAR secretary. You can click that, put Narcon in the subject line, and I check that email address a couple times a day, and I will reply. If it's a complex question, I will at least shoot you a note saying, "Hey, you need a thoughtful reply more than you need a quick reply. Give me a couple days." Uh, but always happy to answer questions. So let's see. Oh, there's another question popped up. Is it sufficient to examine the METAR and NOTAM? On the day, I would say, um, define sufficient. You can, if you're at the field and pull up a METAR and the NOTAMs and everything is good in the moment, yeah, absolutely. I would say if you haven't left for the field yet, or if you're trying to get a better sense, it's Wednesday and you're trying to get a better sense of Saturday, then I would start consulting the TAFs. Well, the TAFs are only usually valid for 24 hours. Look at the forecast discussion, look at the prog charts, and even at the rough and ready level, the weather channel is just fine for rough and ready. But if you're at the field trying to figure out what ceilings are, and understand that if there's not an airport nearby, you're getting the best data available. So if we're flying, for example, if Narhams is flying from Crimgold Park in Carroll County, Maryland, and I were out there, uh, I would probably pull up METARs for Carroll County Regional Airport, DMW, um, Frederick, FDK. Our old field was 5 miles from Frederick. That made for nice, accurate reporting. Um, let's see. I don't think Davis Field has weather reporting, and Montgomery County, Gaithersburg, which is a little farther away, but it starts giving you a sense of of what you're flying into. And of course, real world, if you fly something that goes into a cloud, you say oops and confine yourself to lower flights. Okay, I'm caught up on Q&A. Okay. Uh, Collectively, you're welcome. Uh, so I will stay here until the broadcast ends. We're about 3.5 minutes to go. And again, if you've got anything you would like to share, chat window is open, Q&A is open. Thank you very much for your patience with the technical glitches. I do apologize again. I think it's been an interesting session. I hope I've enjoyed working with the questions here, and I hope you got something out of it. And I'll see you in other sessions today.